Hello everyone, and welcome to the Synology Product Online Training. We have a great topic for everyone today, going over Synology's C2 Surveillance Station. Quick introduction, my name's Cody. I'm a product manager here at Synology, and I'll be your guide for this one this time around. Before we dive too deeply into C2 Surveillance Station, let's first refresh our memory on Surveillance Station, the on-premises solution that allows you to turn your Synology NAS into an NVR. Now, Surveillance Station is a package on your Synology NAS that allows you to turn that NAS into an NVR and use it as a professional video management system. It gives you the ability to scale your system as your organization does and gives you the opportunity to fail over to other Synology recording servers that might be lying in wait should there ever be a failure on one of your other systems. There's also a wide range of third-party integrations, and this is one of the many reasons why people would choose Synology's Surveillance Station. You can essentially purchase your Synology NAS and NVR, and most typically you can slot it in alongside cameras that are already deployed in your environment. Now, in choosing on-premises Surveillance Station for your Synology NAS as your main video management software, you get an integrated hardware and software experience. You have a Synology NAS, your NVR, and also Surveillance Station from one single vendor to perform this action. You also get integration with other purpose-built Synology NVRs that have the ability to do deep video analytics, like the devices from our DVA lineup. You also have flexible licensing associated with the Synology on-premises Surveillance Station solution. Since these licenses are perpetual, you don't have the same recurring license fees you would get with other platforms that you may choose for your on-premises deployment. Now, another main reason why people choose to go with Surveillance Station on-premises with their Synology NAS is it essentially slots in with devices they may already have deployed. There's over 8,000 compatible cameras on Synology's compatibility list for IP cameras, so most typically, Synology NAS can slot into your surveillance deployment and begin receiving streams from your cameras. Likewise, there's also support for ONVIF profiles ST and G inside of the Surveillance Station solution. Now, to simplify our Surveillance Station solution, as just a quick refresher once again, we have your Synology NAS, and Surveillance Station is a package you install on top of it that turns it into an NVR and your video management system in general. Now, all of your IP cameras in your environment will be streaming back to Surveillance Station and your Synology NAS and would be recorded there. And your individual users could sign in with their domain credentials or local user and group accounts, for example, and then actually interact with the live feeds and playback for those cameras. Now, this is a simplified take of the overall Surveillance Station solution, but this can get much more complicated and complex depending on how big your organization is and the different varying degrees of overall third-party integration your deployment would need. Overall, on-premises Surveillance Station is a great solution for medium to large businesses that require central management of their surveillance footage and wide device support. Let's say you already have an NVR in place with many different cameras out in your environment. Surveillance Station would be a good candidate to replace your NVR and take control over those cameras that are already deployed. What we're going to be focusing on today, however, is actually Synology's C2 Surveillance Station, a simple-to-use cloud-based video surveillance solution with end-to-end encryption you get with any C2 service. On the agenda today, we're going to begin with C2 Surveillance Station, which will allow us to take a look at some of the different features and options available in this video surveillance as a service platform. We're then going to take a look at Synology's C2 cameras, direct-to-camera models that are manufactured by Synology for C2 Surveillance Station. We're going to round things out by taking a look at some use cases and comparisons of C2 Surveillance Station with, let's say, an on-premises Surveillance Station deployment on your regular Synology NAS. Moving on into section 1, taking a look at a solution overview for C2 Surveillance Station. In this section, we're going to start off with Synology's C2 Surveillance Station and get an overview of this new platform. We're then going to take a look at C2 Cam, which is essentially just the DS Cam application, but for the Synology C2 surveillance platform. So it's essentially the accompanying app for your iOS or your Android devices. We're going to round things out in this section by taking a look at the pricing model for Synology's C2 Surveillance Station. Synology's C2 Surveillance Station is a comprehensive video management system from Synology inside of its C2 cloud and allows you to do things like live streaming, playback, AI detection at the edge, event notifications, and advanced user management utilizing some other services and platforms inside of the greater C2 ecosystem. You also have the option for cloud backups with your camera footage for the direct-to-cloud Synology C2 cameras. These cameras come with a micro SD card available for them, and you're actually able to store footage directly on those cards and back them up to the C2 cloud with specific plans with this platform. There's also high levels of security inside of the Synology C2 data centers. There's end-to-end encryption for all C2 communications for all Synology platforms. And likewise, our Synology C2 data centers are ISO 27001 or SOC 2 Type 2 certified depending on their location. And with C2 Surveillance Station, since this is a cloud-based solution, there is full remote access for your video footage, and it's available on demand when you need it. So here we are in C2 Surveillance Station. Let's go ahead and get things set up for the first time. So what we're going to do is actually move over to the Get Started button. We can choose what data center we want this all to live in, and then we can add in our camera's pins. We're going to start off with just one right now to show you what this initial setup process looks like, and then show you where to add more cameras after the fact. We're going to configure the username and password for this camera and go ahead and click Next, and then it'll begin setting up that username and password for the Synology C2 cameras. Since this is our first time in Synology C2 Surveillance Station, we're going to need to set up the C2 encryption key. So we're going to go ahead and type that out there and save it somewhere safe, like a password manager like C2 Password. We're also going to go ahead and download this recovery code in case we ever forget our C2 encryption key. Now, once that's all complete, you can also set up biometric entry for your C2 encryption. However, we're going to skip this step this time. And there you have it. We have our first camera set up, and we are looking outside, as you can see in this view. Now, if you go down to camera management, this is going to be where you can add additional cameras after the fact using the Add Camera button on the top right. And you can add in the different pin codes for all these cameras here. Once that's complete, you'll be presented with that same menu again to actually type in the username and password for all of these cameras. Once you hit Next, that's going to go ahead and configure all these cameras for your C2 Surveillance Station instance. And you can see it's going to do a firmware update process for these cameras you just added. Before stepping into our demo environment, let's take a look at our guide for this portion of today's session. We're going to be moving through each of these 6 different categories in our demo, starting off with the monitoring capabilities inside of C2 Surveillance Station. Now that we've added several cameras, let's go ahead and check out what the monitoring features are inside of C2 Surveillance Station. So to do that, we're going to go on to the left-hand pane where you can see all those other icons, and Monitor Center is the top left icon. Once we click that button, we're going to be presented with our default layout, and you can see we have our 5 cameras that we have added right here. And we can create a new layout. We're going to name this one Spot. Once you do so, it's going to be a similar workflow to Monitor Center inside of Surveillance Station on premises. You're going to click and drag the cameras onto the layout to commit them to this layout. Now, once you've selected all of your cameras, we're going to exit out of the Edit Layout menu on the top right side, and now we have that new Spot layout available for usage. Now, at the very bottom, you can click on View Timeline to pull the timeline up, and you can begin interacting with the timeline for these various tiles in your Monitor Center layout. You'll notice on the bottom left there's a non-sync mode button and a sync mode button. Non-sync mode will allow you to roll back individual tiles themselves to different events that you can see on the timeline, whereas sync mode would move all of the tiles at the same time whenever you roll the timeline backwards. So what we're going to do is select one of these camera tiles, and we're going to jump back to previous events, and you can see that camera tile refreshing and actually jumping to that previous event. Now that we've seen how to use the non-sync mode, if we click on the sync mode button and actually jump back to additional events for this entire layout, you notice that all the cameras jump back to that previous event. In this event scenario here, we just had our CS400CW camera having a detection, so that's why you see that one populated in this menu here. Once you've actually found your detections, you can also use Jump to Live to bring the entire timeline back to the live point. And of course, at any point, you can right-click on the timeline at the bottom and click Download, and you can download a specific clip for the camera you have selected. You can also download your event results utilizing the event filter that we'll show a little bit later that lets you grab specific events rather than pulling it directly from the timeline, and we'll see that in just a moment. Next, let's check out the camera management features inside of C2 Surveillance Station. Now that we've added cameras and actually interfaced with our Monitor Center and created a new layout, let's go back into camera management and see what other settings we can manipulate inside of C2 Surveillance Station. So as we're in this menu, we're going to go into the left-hand pane that will expand it out, and we're going to click on camera management, and we can see all the cameras we added previously once again. Now, if we hover over a specific camera in this menu and then also click on it, what it's going to do is it's going to actually open up a right-hand attribute pane for that specific camera. we're going to be able to actually see camera details in this right-hand pane, such as the camera model, the firmware version it's on, etc. And there's also a setup camera button at the very bottom that you can utilize to get into the same menu we're about to hop into. Likewise, you can click these three dots and click Setup Camera, and you can see all the different settings for the image, for example, on the first tab. Now, this image setting here, you can adjust all these different sliders. There's also an exposure, day-night tab, and you can also change what the overlay looks like. There's also a video and audio tab. This is going to be what allows you to change your video format and your video quality for your Synology C2 cameras. Likewise, there is also a recording and backup tab. This is going to be where you can monitor the health of the micro SD card in the camera, and you can also check on your backup rules if you're using the backup plan with C2 Surveillance Station. Likewise, there's also a networking tab if you need to change some networking settings for this or multiple cameras, and a maintenance tab where you can configure things like the camera name and the user for actually managing this camera. You can also scroll down and configure the automatic update settings. You can select automatically install the update at a specific point in time. Definitely suggested to do this during off-peak hours, and that'll help you optimize your overall bandwidth usage in your environment. Now, we skipped over the detection option. We'll be jumping into that tab in just a moment. Moving on into event detection and advanced AI functionality you get with Synology C2 cameras and C2 Surveillance Station. Okay, so we took a look at most of the other camera management settings, but let's go ahead and check out the detection tab inside of this camera management menu. This is going to be where you can configure the detection rules for your specific cameras. And you can see there's an option for configuring the people and vehicle detection as well as the intrusion detection, or your virtual fence. If we edit the people and vehicle detection, you can see that once we open this menu, you're able to adjust the detection view, and you can actually click in the middle of these lines to add an additional adjustment point for this specific shape you're creating. So you can create kind of oblong, odd shapes for your detection area as needed. Now, keep in mind, there's also different detection settings below that menu. You can enable or disable people or vehicle detection, detect all people or all vehicles, and set your loitering period. Likewise, there's also an option to ignore small objects inside of this menu for this detection option. Now, the other option for this camera is intrusion detection. Since this is a turret-style camera that is based off the TC500 camera for on-premises surveillance station, it has similar detection features. So this is just showing you that there is intrusion detection options for this camera, and you can see some of the other detection options beneath it. But let's go ahead and check out that CS400CW and actually adjust the detection results for that camera, because it's looking across a street and there's going to be several cars driving past this throughout the day. So we're going to set up a virtual fence across this street so we're detected at any time a car passes in front of this camera. Now, what we're going to do is go ahead and set up this intrusion detection option here. And you can see we can, again, adjust this virtual fence to cross this street here. And we're going to just adjust this so it grabs the sidewalk, the street, as well as into the bushes slightly into the building across the way. So that we're detected actually for cars and also people too, just in case there's anyone walking on the side of the street. Now, what we're going to do is go ahead and add people and vehicle detection for this and set the direction to two-way, since this is a two-way street without a gate. Now, likewise, there's also an ignore small objects button you see right there. And that's how you can configure the detection values for the turret and bullet style cameras, as well as the Wi-Fi camera that we had added to our C2 surveillance station system. So now we've configured the advanced edge AI detection capabilities of these Synology C2 cameras. Let's go ahead and check out the event filtering options so we can find these events a little bit easier once those detection results start to roll in. So what we're going to do is move over to the left-hand pane, and as we hover over it, it's going to expand. And you can see there's different icons for people, vehicle, and motion detection. When you click on one of those icons, you're going to be able to see all the detection results of that category. You can filter further by the event type, by the specific camera in question, and you can also set up a date range that you want to search within. So once you have your detection results all selected, you can then begin to review those detection results on the right-hand menu. You can see all the different tiles with all the different detection options. Now, if we click on one, of course, we can see right in the timeline for this camera where this detection actually occurred. And you can see those people walking across the sidewalk right there past that virtual fence that we created just a few moments ago. You can also restart from event utilizing the button on the right-hand side. And of course, just like before, you can go down to the timeline, right-click at any point, and then download footage from this detection for this specific camera. Now that we have the detection methods configured, let's check out notifications for those events, as well as logs available to you inside of C2 Surveillance Station. Now in this menu, what we're going to do is hover over the left-hand pane and jump to the notifications button, and we're going to be able to configure the notification settings. Now you can see the first column is all about your push notifications to your C2 Cam app, and you can select which ones would be pushed to your mobile devices. You can also configure your email notifications on top of that. Now if you move over to the right-hand side and click the pencil edit button for this specific detection result, you can exclude certain cameras from it. So if you didn't want to see a detection notifications for vehicle detection for a specific set of cameras, you could configure that here. Now, once that's all configured, you can also configure a notify schedule for these notifications, similar to on-premises surveillance station. You're able to block out periods of times where you would not receive these notifications. Maybe you don't want to receive notifications in the evening, for example. You could block off that. Now, keep in mind, you can get very granular inside of this menu. You can block off or enable individual cells in this menu you see here. Now, once that's all done, let's move over to the Event History tab. In the Event History tab, we're going to be able to filter our event results. This is essentially where all of your events live across all of your cameras. You can review them by clicking this preview button, and it will jump you right to that camera and right to when that detection result was actually detected. Just like other menus that we've seen in this regard, you can restart from the event a few different times if you wanted to review it, or jump to the live shot of that camera. Now, you can select any of these individual detection results and actually click the More button on the top right-hand side and download individual clips directly here, rather than using the timeline download feature that you've seen previously. Now, just like many other menus we've seen in C2 Surveillance Station, there's also an advanced filter on the left-hand side. You're able to set a time range that you want to search against. You can also choose to filter by event types and across specific cameras. So you could select an individual camera and see all the different detection results for that camera listed in the right-hand menu. And then you could select one, multiple, or all of those clips and download all the detection results for that specific camera in this menu. Now let's move over into System History. System History is where you can see the alerts for if a camera was connected or disconnected, for example. And like the Event History, there's also a filter for this for a specific time range and across specific cameras as well. Also, keep in mind, there's a bell icon always at the top right-hand side of your screen. You can always jump into this menu and see all of your event detection results and all of your system notifications as well in one easy-to-access location. The last thing we wanted to show in this portion is the logging. Now, like the previous menus, there's also a filter and search option at the very top. You can do a date range, and you can select what source you want, like an admin or a system user. And at the top right-hand side, of course, there is an export option. So you can export logs outside of C2 Surveillance Station for retention in another platform. Maybe you want to keep your logs for quite some time. You can definitely do so with that export feature. Next, let's check out user management and user privilege options inside of C2 Surveillance Station. We are now going to start talking about user management inside of C2 Surveillance Station. Keep in mind, since we are using Synology C2 Cloud Platform, that means that our user management is going to come from Synology's C2 Identity, another cloud service that is available, usually included with other services you're already utilizing, such as C2 Backup as just another example. So a portion of this demo is going to be about C2 Identity, and if you need more information on that platform, we also did a Synology product online training on that platform too. So what we're going to do now is move to the left-hand pane and go ahead and click the user button, and you can see there's not any users available inside our menu. We're going to go ahead and click the Start button here in the middle of the screen, and we're going to set up our domain name for our C2 Identity instance because we're setting this whole account up for the first time. Now, since we added that domain name, you're going to notice that there's no users populated. And so what we're going to do instead is hop over to C2 Identity, type in that C2 encryption key we created originally, and we're going to be able to set up new users inside of the C2 Identity instance. Now we're going to add a user manually. Again, if you need more information on C2 Identity, go ahead and check out our Synology product online training on this very topic. But we're going to type in our username and email address and all of that good stuff. Now on this next screen, we're going to be able to configure the activation process for this specific user. You can send an activation email, or you could specify a password or generate one, what have you. We're going to actually specify a password just to make this a little bit simpler for this process, and we're going to go ahead and move on. Now, once this is done, we can assign a group for this specific user. We're going to go ahead and choose the default device user. We're going to change the privilege profile for these specific users in a moment inside of C2 Surveillance Station. Now, once that's all done, we can now find the sign-in information for this specific user. But what we're going to do is hop back over to the C2 Surveillance Station and refresh this list. Now, once that's all complete, you can see that user we just created in C2 Identity is now viewable inside of C2 Surveillance Station, and we can bring this user in as a user here, giving them no access, allowing them to be an observer or an operator of the system, and you can see descriptions for those different categories in this dropdown here. We're going to choose an observer role for this user at this point in time, and we're going to go ahead and click Next. Now, once that's all complete, this user now has the observer role that's default inside of C2 Surveillance Station. Now, under role management, we're going to be able to add additional roles and get a little bit more granular on what those roles are allowed to do. We're going to go ahead and name our role Spot, and we're going to choose this checkbox here if we need it or not. And you can see under the setup privilege for each camera, we can choose if this specific privilege profile has access to all permissions for a camera. There's also an auto discovery feature for new cameras. You can select what kind of permissions this privilege profile would have for accessing a new camera. And you can see your current cameras listed below that. You can give this user profile and privilege profile all access to this camera, or you can get more specific and give them live view and playback access as just a quick example. Now, once you selected this, you can also choose what layouts are available to this user. You can choose specific layouts, and you can see the Spot layout we created in our previous demos. And you can also do sort of an auto discovery and allow this user to grab future layouts if you create them later. Now, you can choose what users to actually set for this full privilege profile. And once that's all done, this user will now be a part of that Spot privilege role that we just created. Now, if we go back to the user menu, we can see that this user now has this Spot user role we just created and specific access to certain cameras and certain layouts. Very similar to privilege profiles and user management inside of on-premises surveillance station. Moving on into section 2, Synology C2 cameras. Upon launch, there's going to be several Synology C2 cameras available to C2 Surveillance Station, that being the CS500B, the CS500T, and the CS400CW. The CS500B and T models are bullet and turret models respectively, and they'll look familiar if you're using Synology cameras for Surveillance Station already. These are the cloud versions of those models. Now, the CS400CW is a Wi-Fi enabled direct-to-cloud camera that is great for those smaller environments that may not have the ability to run PoE directly to the cameras themselves. Maybe they only have a USB-C connection very close to where they need a camera placed. Synology's C2 direct-to-cloud cameras are very similar to the cameras that are designed for Surveillance Station on premises. But these cameras offer a simpler installation because you simply need to provide these cameras power and networking, and then they're able to record directly to the Synology C2 cloud. Whereas an on-premises Synology NAS deployment, you actually have to configure that NAS itself before you can actually begin recording that camera footage. For the Synology C2 direct-to-cloud cameras, there's still great functionality like Edge AI detection capabilities. There's on-camera processing for people and vehicle analytics, like you see with the other Synology camera models for Surveillance Station as well. These Synology C2 direct-to-cloud cameras are also bandwidth friendly. If you're using the cloud-only license plan, you actually see lower overall bandwidth consumption when compared to a fully on-premises deployment with Surveillance Station. Likewise, all Synology cameras on premises for Surveillance Station or the direct-to-cloud cameras, they're all fully NDAA and TAA compliant. In terms of the Synology camera's Edge AI analytics, you can do people and vehicle detection using the Edge AI capabilities directly in the camera. You're able to define detection zones and set immediate or idle alerts for those detection results. You can also do intrusion detection, which essentially allows you to build a virtual fence, and the system will alert you if that fence is ever breached. You can also do loitering control as well, allowing you to detect when people transiting a zone exceeds a threshold you set. Particularly helpful if you're running a retail environment and you want to identify some choke points. In terms of storage for Synology C2 Surveillance Station, all of the Synology cameras we discussed today will come with an included Synology 256GB micro SD card called the MSD01, which will allow you to perform edge recording functionality for your C2 Surveillance Station environment. And the behavior of this onboard storage will differ depending on what plan you've selected for your environment. If you're using the C2 camera without the additional backup license for C2 Surveillance Station, then your recordings will be saved on the onboard pre-installed micro SD card we just discussed. That card can store around 2 to 3 weeks of camera footage, depending on what your video settings are. Now, if you're using the C2 camera alongside the backup license, then your video will first be stored on that micro SD card and then backed up to Surveillance Station based on a schedule that you set. Now, this brings up another hot topic in cloud-based video surveillance, and that is bandwidth controls. And C2 Surveillance Station has several different bandwidth controls you can take advantage of. First off is peer-to-peer connections. Let's say you're accessing your client from your normal local network, and you have several different C2 surveillance cameras on that local network. Instead of reaching out to C2 Surveillance Station and collecting your streams from there, you can create a peer-to-peer connection between your client and your local C2 cameras and actually stream directly from them, helping you to save bandwidth in that case. Likewise, there's also a low bandwidth mode for Synology's C2 cameras. This means that a 5 megapixel Synology C2 camera, for example, can reduce its bitrate from, let's say, 4 megabits per second to 2 megabits per second on upload to help you save bandwidth there. Likewise, there's an optimized upload pathway for your overall backups for your C2 cameras. You can set up a schedule so that it's only sending data on off-peak hours. And likewise, you can also optimize download procedures for C2 Surveillance Station, only downloading firmware updates based on a schedule you set, as another example. Moving on to Section 3, use cases and comparisons for Synology C2 Surveillance Station alongside Synology's Surveillance Station for on-premises Synology NAS. Synology's C2 Surveillance Station was created to offer Synology users a simple plug-and-play multi-site management solution for their surveillance environment. This same design philosophy will help you meet other surveillance challenges head-on. If we're talking about an organization that has accelerated timelines, having a cloud-based video management system like C2 Surveillance Station is invaluable because essentially you just need to install the cameras, provide them power and networking, and they're immediately able to protect your environment. So in those kind of environments that have a quick setup time requirement, then having C2 Surveillance Station as the go-to video management system is a good selection. Likewise, if you're working with an organization that has limited space, using C2 Surveillance Station is a great solution because only the cameras take up physical space in your environment. You don't also need to find space for a rack mount or a desktop Synology NAS in this case. Likewise, if you have limited oversight or budget for oversight in a surveillance deployment, having C2 Surveillance Station gives you kind of a centralized dashboard for all of your cameras in the environment. If you're using an on-premises deployment, then you have to manage and monitor individual Synology NAS or provide different control structures for managing and monitoring multiple. Now, some different organizations that might have these kinds of challenges associated with them is a construction site, for example, may have a limited amount of utilities available on it and limited amount of power, and likewise, they'll need quick setup to protect the different materials that are staged on a job site. C2 Surveillance Station would be a good solution for this because you don't also need to stand up a Synology NAS on a dirty job site, for example. Likewise, retail chains or franchises would definitely benefit from C2 Surveillance Station because there may be limited IT space and IT budget for managing different components. So using a Synology NAS in that scenario may not be feasible, and C2 Surveillance Station may be a better fit because it's simple and plug and play. Likewise, schools or micro businesses would also benefit from much of the same functionality. Now, taking a look at a closer solution comparison between C2 Surveillance Station and Surveillance Station on an on-premises Synology NAS, C2 Surveillance Station is best for multiple locations with a low camera count, and it's ideal for environments with no extra space that can accommodate a physical Synology NAS, either desktop or rack mount. Likewise, C2 Surveillance Station is good for those deployments that requires a plug-and-play solution. Surveillance Station, on the other hand, is better for those deployments with multiple locations with a large camera count. And it's ideal for environments that require connection with various brands for monitoring. It has more third-party integrations in on-premises Surveillance Station. Likewise, if your deployment requires local backup mechanisms, Surveillance Station also has functionality built into the Synology NAS side of things to help support that. And finally, on-premise Surveillance Station also has some additional advanced AI analytics by utilizing the Synology DVA lineup, particularly facial recognition. Overall, Synology's C2 Surveillance Station really simplifies your surveillance management for your deployment. You basically get to eliminate on-premises servers while keeping bandwidth low under normal operations. You also have good levels of security by using Synology C2 Surveillance Station. All of Synology's C2 services are protected by end-to-end encryption, and that is also true for Synology's C2 Surveillance Station. And finally, there's flexible plans associated with C2 Surveillance Station, With using Synology's C2 surveillance station with just the C2 camera, you get a lot of great features. And by adding that license, you also get deeper retention and backup functionality for your surveillance footage. Moving on into section 4, recap and next steps. We started off by taking a look at Synology's C2 surveillance station, a video surveillance as a service platform in Synology's C2 cloud. We then took a look at Synology's C2 cameras, direct-to-cloud options in the Synology cameras lineup. We rounded things out by looking at some use cases, some surveillance challenges, and a comparison between C2 surveillance station and on-site surveillance station with the Synology NAS. Now, if you need help past what this webinar I provided, go ahead and check out our Synology product online training page. We have hours and hours of video content there. If you need help past what those webinars provide, go ahead and check out our Synology knowledge base. We have step-by-step guides on a range of topics. And if you need help past what those resources can help you with, go ahead and send us an inquiry, and our highly trained inquiry team will get your questions answered. Now, if you're a business end user with your own internal IT team, go ahead and reach out to onboarding@synologyamerica.com, and we can connect you with some resources here. If you're a reseller or a partner, go ahead and reach out to sac_sales@synology.com, and we can get you connected with your account manager here. And lastly, for our UK friends, if you have any UK offices or UK clients, go ahead and reach out to uk_sales@synology.com, and we can get you some help there too. With that said, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time.